I'll tell you a funny story about Francis Ngannou. Have I ever told you this?
I don't know.
So, during the pandemic, when you did our show,
yeah.
right, I was doing loads of stuff on Zoom, just trying to create content. And I read that Francis Ngannou wanted to be a boxer, right, and was interested in fighting. So I got in touch with his team, because he'd had a little bit of beef with Dillian Whyte, nothing major. And I got in touch with his team. I said, look, let's do a Zoom, you, me, and Dillian Whyte, right, just bored. So they've agreed to it. Next thing, I'm on a Zoom with Dillian Whyte and Francis Ngannou, basically going at it, right? I'll knock you out, I'll do it, you know, he's all hyper, blah, blah, blah. Then, word has got to the UFC that I've done, ultimately, a press conference to promote a fight. But I wasn't even thinking, Ariel, you know, and then Dana messaged me and said, what are you doing? And I'm like, what? And he said, you've done a press conference with Francis Ngannou and Dillian Whyte. I'm like, well, it wasn't really a press conference, it was just a Zoom. It was, and then I thought, then I got a legal letter from the UFC to say, like, you can't be putting this out. They were 1,000,000% right. Okay. But, you know, at the time I was thinking, this is massive. You know, and I still think Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou, AJ, didn't know, there's huge, huge fights. So I think that fighter power has drifted down the UFC probably a little bit slower than it did in boxing. Mm-hmm. It's very old promoters, you know, every fighter that I represent is my boss. Whether they're a kid debuting in their first fight at 19, I work for the fighter. That's my mentality. The old school, they couldn't say it. You know, if you said to Bob Arum, tell me that Terence Crawford's your boss. Go on, say it, Bob. Oh, I can't. You know, he couldn't say it. So fighter power in boxing, you know, for a while now, they've become the boss. They've become, you know, in control of their own destiny. For UFC, where they've been very smart is by, it's such an honour to get a UFC deal. You know, you see these kids coming out of Bellator or Cage Warriors or wherever it is, like the thought of getting a UFC contract is everything. But I feel in UFC, they don't want you to get too big, you know, and when you do, I mean, I used to almost laugh at Conor because I could just imagine just the disruption that he was causing in that organisation, because that's not really the name of the game. We don't want a star that is bigger than the UFC. Conor McGregor became bigger than the UFC, really. And that's a nightmare for those guys. The one thing I will say is, and I think is you know, certainly their margins are very favourable to the organisation over the fighters, but they do, you know, when you go to the Institute and stuff like that, there is parts and benefits of being involved with the organisation that maybe you don't see. It's a very powerful business.